Hey, Dan.
Hey, Tom.
Okay,
Make it down. You look like you're in a hotel.
I am in a hotel room. Story of my life, it seems. Beautiful Victoria, British Columbia.
Hey, Brett.
Hey, Brett. Kathy.
Hey, Duncan. Okay, it is 4:30, and I'll call the meeting to order. Just make sure everybody's present. Councillor Anderson. Gotcha. All right. We see you. So I call the meeting to order and like to acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation, Tla-o-qui-aht And a notice to attendees that the meeting is being video recorded and will be published on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. And I move that pursuant to Section 15 of the District of Tofino Meeting Procedure Bylaw number 1229/2016 is amended, the February 8th, 2022 regular meeting be held electronically via Zoom and live broadcasted on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel, and that the facility provided for the public to watch and hear the meeting be located at the Municipal Hall, 161 3rd Street in Tofino, BC. And if there's no objection to adopting that motion, I will go ahead and adopt it. Seeing none, motion is adopted. I do have an addition to the agenda. It's not really an addition, but an amendment to an existing point in the agenda, and that is to the closed session to include K, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service that are at their preliminary stages, and that, in the view of council, could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality if they were held in public. I'm not sure if I needed a motion for that addition. Mr. McMaster, can I just add that in?
You can add that in right now, and then when council is going to close meeting, just make sure that section is cited. Yes,
I will do that. Okay, noting that addition. If there's no objection to adopting the agenda as presented, I will go ahead and do that. Seeing no objection, the agenda is adopted. We have a consent agenda, which has many parts, including the Events, Arts, Cultural Heritage Advisory Committee recommendations, which we're very glad to see. However, it is in the consent agenda. So if there is no objection to adopting the consent agenda as presented, and I'll move that items 4.1 to 4.3 of the consent agenda on the regular council meeting held February 8th, 2022 be received and approved. And if there is no objection to adopting and approving that, I will go ahead and do that. Seeing no objection, consent agenda is adopted. Do we have any public comment on agenda items?
Thank you, Mayor Law. Currently, we do not have any requests for comments, but I will call once for the public. We do have a few participants at this meeting. And if you do want to submit comment for an item on the agenda, and if you're in the attendees list right now, you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom window. So I will call twice. And seeing none, I'll call thrice. Just to be sure, give someone a moment. Okay, and it looks like we don't have any comments.
Super. Okay, well, we have a mayor's report. And just to note that Councillor McMaster and I attended a follow-up meeting hosted by Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation representatives Resort representatives and West Coast Hospitality Association representatives to discuss some MOU and MRDT discussions, and those were very well received. Discussions were excellent, and we look forward to moving forward and working closely together. Other than that, for Mayor's report, I could just say I'm just happy to be in Tofino and see all your smiling faces, and such a great team. That's it for me. Delegations, none. Correspondence. We have a correspondence from Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation regarding parking passes, 9.1. We can discuss this. I do have a couple comments. I'm looking to Mr. McPherson. What would you wish from council for this?
Your Worship, council may recall that at the last council-to-council meeting that Tofino council had with Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation council, parking was, as it generally is, an issue they were looking to have further discussion on. I have traded emails with their administrator, and they have been looking for a meeting. So perhaps a good next step would be for council, or for the mayor on behalf of council, to reach out to Chief Councillor George and see if a meeting can be established to talk about the ongoing issue of lots of demand for parking and not enough spaces at certain times of the year.
Certainly. And do we need to do any council discussion or comment at this time, in your opinion, for staff, or should we go ahead and have a meeting?
I think it's fine without anything further. Council can certainly weigh in if they choose, but I think it's fine for
okay,
you to proceed with contacting Tla-o-qui-aht and seeing if a discussion can a time for a discussion can be established. I do recall from our council-to-council meeting that they were looking to have kind of a few members from each community get together on this. So perhaps offline, other councillors who are interested in this could contact Mayor Law and indicate their enthusiasm for talking about downtown parking.
excellent. So I will put it out for council if anybody wants to have any comments at this time, or we can keep those comments to the meeting. And also, if I would prefer if a councillor or two would be interested in joining me to meet with TFN representatives to discuss parking. And I see Councillor Thick, you have your hand up. And then Councillor Steer.
I wondered if I could ask a point of clarification on the letter, please, because it was something I hadn't heard or understood before. And I quote from the letter that the parking passes that are somehow in question are tribal parks issued parking passes. Is this the case?
That, as far as I understand from the letter and from the intent, is what they would like to the district to recognize, as far as I understand from the letter, recognize. So I think there's a couple parts to this. One is that they would like to recognize us, the district, to recognize tribal parks parking passes to allow some members to park where they otherwise wouldn't be allowed to, and then also to forgive bylaw infraction fines related to parking for TFN members is what I understand the request is. Of course, there's that requires significant discussion, but does that answer your question?
Yeah, and also I would like to go to the meeting, and I would really appreciate some more information from Bylaw about the nature of this issue, because I don't have any data in front of me to to even understand. I didn't understand. This is the first time I've heard of this, and that we're being asked in the letter that the District of Tofino recognized, quote, the TFN issued parking passes. And so in one part of the letter, it says tribal park passes, and another part it says TFN issued parking passes. So I guess I'm interested to know what exactly is what is the request, and also from Bylaw, I'd like to understand and hear what sort of numbers TFN is speaking about when they say in the letter about the forgiveness of the parking offenses. So if that were to be the case, I would really appreciate a report in preparation for that. That's my comment. Thank you.
I see. Yeah, I think my opinion is that this is being presented to all of us, and of course nothing's been decided, certainly not decided or even discussed, thus warranting the discussion with TFN, first of all, for clarity and understanding what exactly their asks are, and of course then council and staff discussing and weighing in. I believe Councillor Steer and then Councillor Anderson. And I think we've all noted that that we do need further discussion with TFN on this, and of course further discussion with council. Go ahead, Councillor Steer.
Thank you, Mayor Law. I thought it might be appropriate, and if Fraser Works was invited in that conversation as the architect of our pay parking system, it might be he may be valuable in those conversations, or it's just a suggestion, and I'll let the staff think about if that's appropriate or not to have in that discussion. It'd just be nice to have someone with more of the technical background of our pay parking plans to this point, and what he may be thinking of into the future, and maybe that an appropriate place for the input from Tla-o-qui-aht to have at that point. It's just a suggestion.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson?
I would be interested in helping with attendance and moving the discussion forward with Tla-o-qui-aht. I would suggest maybe any attendees from council maybe get a little bit of a briefing from staff. I think it's a bit early for a staff report on it, but just some sort of briefing, sort of with some ideas of sort of where we are, particularly around moving forward with downtown parking, pay parking program, and so we're fully understanding where we're at before we go to the meeting. So yeah, and I agree with Councillor Steer that it would be helpful to have Mr. Work attend as well.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor McMaster.
I'll just mention this issue comes up at least twice every council session. So I'm not sure where some of you have been, but there's definitely been no movement either way on this. So we'll see what happens. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent information. I do want to note that the letter states issues with parking at the beaches, and beach pay parking is free for all residents of Tofino, as well as Esopus and Opitsit for TFN members. So that is extended without cost to those members presently, and there is no pay parking downtown at this time. Without any further comments on that, I will move along, and we will organize a meeting for councillors interested with staff, and then we'll reach out to Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation for a meeting, hopefully very soon. It sounds like this has been ongoing for quite a while, so it's a good time to start working on this a little harder. Moving along, we have presentations and reports. We have an invited presentation from Macola Development Services regarding our housing needs assessment.
So I have promoted Sandy McKay from Macola Development Services. Sandy, just let me know if you have anyone attending with you that you would also like me to promote.
No, it's just me tonight.
Okay, perfect.
Great. Well, perfect. Thanks so much, everybody. I'm glad to be here and nice to see you all again. I think throughout this process, we've been able to meet almost all of you at a social distance, but it was really nice being able to actually come in the fall last year to do some of this work with you in person. So we finished the project. We're really excited to share the results with you today. In addition to the full report, which is included as part of your agenda package, I'll be running through the key findings today, as well as we're doing it quick. So hopefully we've got some time to answer any questions that you've got that comes up throughout the presentation. So I will just share my screen and we'll get going. Perfect. Great. Awesome. So thanks very much for the introduction. My name is Sandy Mackey. I'm the Housing Research and Policy Lead at Macola Development Services. Ourselves, along with our partners at Turner Drake and Partners Limited, we're contracted by a group of 5 communities to conduct the West Coast Housing Need and Demand Study. Includes not only the District of Tofino, but also Tla-o-qui-aht Nation, Tla-o-qui-aht Government, the ACRD Area C, and Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation. You've got the report now in your agenda package, but it is, to put it nicely, an extended document. So I'm going to kind of go over a bit of the structure here. So though you may be reading the whole thing, some of your constituents and some of the people watching may just want to find the highlights of the document. So I'll quickly run through that. First and foremost, there is the regional summary and introduction, and that's where we recommend you start. It's the high-level key findings for the entire West Coast region. And it's where some of the most compelling information showed up in our report. The information at a local level is really phenomenal, but at a regional level, you can really start to see how those trends are impacting not only the District of Tofino, but also your neighboring communities. If you want to jump into Tofino specific findings, sorry, that should say Tofino, there is greater detail as well as more localized data within your own housing needs report, including a key finding and executive summary at the very beginning of that report. And then lastly, if you want to dig deeper, you can go through the appendices to the document, which include a full engagement report, an infographic that's about 4 pages long that includes our highest level summary in a sort of graphic format, which might be the best for people who don't want to read through the 10 or 15 page introduction. We've also included some monitoring tools and planning tools documents, as well as a complete summary and the data tables that meet all the requirements set out by UBCM. I'll also talk really briefly about some of the limitations that we had throughout this report. The West Coast is a really challenging data environment. There are many, many small geographies that we're trying to knit together. It's also got a lot of highly seasonal populations. I know that's something that you're all well aware of, but those highly seasonal populations mean that there can be rapid changes with the demographics, economy, and housing situation in your communities, all of which makes it very difficult to catalog need. But the quantitative data is not everything. We received a tremendous engagement response throughout this study. Well over 700 individuals and households participated in the study, which is phenomenal for communities of your size. And by combining those West Coast geographies, we're actually able to stabilize some of the key indicators that we need to use. So everything in the report and all of our key findings are filtered through a combination of data, engagement, and our professional experience, as well as the experience of your staff members. And so we think that though there is a lot of data challenges, it ends up being a fairly robust report with some really accurate and I think defensible findings. So let's jump into it. I'll start by going through quickly a bit about the population households in the District of Tofino. This is one place where we're absolutely expecting your population to grow, and that's really exciting. In 2006, you had about 4,100 people. In 2016, it was about 5,100 people. And in 2026, we're expecting closer to 6,600 people, which is a fairly significant rate of growth. A lot of that is being driven by migration, mostly from around British Columbia. But we're also expecting of the population that is natural or coming from just births and deaths within the District of Tofino, many of that population is growing. And we're expecting those populations of seniors over the age of 65 to more than double between 2016 and 2026 to 17%, actually closer to 20% if you take into account the 85 plus population of your total population. So that has some challenges for housing and housing that you need to offer. But we are still expecting the large proportion of your population to be in this orange sector, this 25 to 44, about 42%. And we've also received a lot of anecdotal demand from younger families and from people looking for more affordable rental options for multiple people. And that 25 to 42-year-old segment is overwhelmingly moving to a rental tenure, partially because of the expensive market, which we'll get into, but also because of choice. And as we talked about, that seasonal and mobile population where maybe renting a home is not the best, or owning a home is not the best option for them. For those older residents that I spoke of, many of the ones that we spoke to were worried about their ability to maintain larger properties, and also were worried that they were not able to downsize because of both cost and availability. That highlights for us the need for those accessible and affordable options, especially rental options, which are more feasible for folks on a fixed income in the absence of ownership options that are smaller. Also, home care and semi-supported or supported housing options will be really critical as people move from 65 to closer to 80 or 90 years old within your community. There's a couple of great quotes here just from older folks. I've had to locate out of my community that I've lived in for 40 years due to scarcity of available and affordable rental housing. I now live where I don't know the people and am far away from my grandchildren and friends. So this is actually someone who recently moved to, I think it was Nanaimo, but was a longtime Tofino resident who are saying that they can't stay in the community because of housing costs. So some of the decisions that can help address this deficit are land use decisions that are prioritizing multi-unit housing of all different types. Doesn't have to be big apartment buildings. Often multi-unit housing takes the form of what you're doing through the THC, so kind of attached row homes, just more modest homes. Older residents in particular said that they did not want fewer bedrooms. They just wanted smaller, more manageable units. They still liked having at least 2, often 3 bedrooms for visiting family and for storage. And then thinking regionally about your land use decisions. We know that Tofino maybe does not have a lot of available land, but other communities do. And by partnering to address regional growth, I think you can allocate the new units that need to be built in the most efficient way possible. And I think there's, as we'll get into, or as you can maybe get into future decisions, a lot of interest in pursuing some of this work regionally rather than as individual communities. The second big theme that I'll get to is renters and the cost of renting. Across the district, rental housing is hard to find, increasingly hard to find. It's becoming more expensive, and it's also more likely to be in poor condition than ownership housing. And renters are overwhelmingly less likely to be able to meet their needs than owners. That is largely due to the amount of income that renters and owners earn. A renter household earns about $51,000 a year, and an owner household earns closer to $82,000 a year, which is fairly standard. That $30,000 gap is quite common between renting and owner households. It's maybe a bit exaggerated in Tofino, but it's within the spectrum of ranges that we see across the province. But some of the things that really struck out to us were in the engagement portion of this. 42% of households in Tofino rent, which is, for a small community, an astronomical number. That's bordering on sort of Vancouver numbers of renter and owner proportions. To put this in perspective, many of the smaller communities we look at have less than 10% of their population renting. And that's just the nature of smaller and in some cases more rural communities. You are unique in this regard, that you have a really substantial portion of renters. 48% of renter respondents to the survey indicated that their current housing costs were not affordable, which is more than what we saw, indicating they were in core housing need, but speaks to the sort of changes that have occurred since the last census. 21% of renters were in core housing need, which means that they were in either unaffordable, unsuitable, or housing that was in poor condition. And that's from the census. That's from now 2016. So that difference between the 48% at unaffordable and 21% will likely have something to do with perceptions of affordability, and also have something to do with the intervening 5 years between the past census and this one. And then a couple of quotes here. These are really things that we saw all the time. Like, wages are not bad here, but rents are astronomical. This person saying that they've got a secured rental and they feel like they've won the lottery. And something we heard all the time is the frequency of moving being a real challenge for residents of Tofino. We've had to move 8 times in the last 11 years. And I think people seem to be more okay and more able to weather those frequent moves when they were in their sort of early 20s or mid 20s. But there are a lot of people who are in their 30s and in their 40s and looking to make Tofino their longtime home, who are realizing that that frequency of move is just not sustainable for them, for their family, and for their mental health, right? That's such a huge burden to have to move that often. And especially when it means uprooting your kids and things like that, right? So again, similar to the options for older residents, it highlights a need for those affordable and appropriate rental options, as well as for workers in key industries. Many of the renters that reported housing insecurity were employed in the tourism and hospitality sector. But it's not just individuals and younger people, it's also those families and individuals who are looking for larger, often multi-bedroom, long-term rental units, and are seeing that, you know, ownership might not be an option for us, but we still want to live in Tofino. And if you can find us an affordable and secured rental option, we'll stay. And that's, I think, where a lot of the energy needs to go, is into providing some of those units. Some of the ways forward, again, encouraging those denser multifamily options where appropriate. Looking at things like rental tenure zoning, which is a power you do have as a local government, or even pre-zoning. So if you've got a site that is that you'd like to see a rental tenure building built in, you can actually pre-zone it before development, which would you know, ensure that a rental option gets built there. You could consider looking at inclusionary zoning policies, which often take the form of density bonusing in British Columbia, and as well looking at incentive packages to encourage affordable units, and of course continuing to monitor and regulate short-term rentals. I think a lot of what you're doing through the THC is going to, you know, be hitting on this rental tenure options, especially as it's going to be secured and affordable. But we'll get into that more as we look at sort of non-market options. This is sort of focused more on the market and what you can offer and incentivize in the private market. And then the last thing I'll touch on is cost of ownership. So we, though we've all, I think most people will have received their updated assessment for the year 2021. We haven't actually seen the sales figures filter out. So the latest data point we've got here is 2020, and we've held everything at $2020. And you can see that, you know, though the Tofino market has been expensive, it has actually been relatively stable over the past 10 years when we adjust. Some increases and some decrease years up until about 2019. And then in 2020, the market for single detached homes especially went through the roof. And this is a product of limited sales volumes. So 2020 was a year where there was just not much moving on the market in general. But it's also a product of the most expensive year we've seen in British Columbia, maybe ever. And in 2021, we would expect that price to go even higher. It's likely that, as you can see here, the median average single detached home in Tofino sold for close to $1.6 million last year. We'd expect it to be the same or potentially higher in 2021. But it's not just that the price is, you know, this might be misleading and might look like the year 2020 is an outlier. But what we've actually done is taken the median cost of ownership and the mortgage that a household earning the median income could reasonably afford. And we've mapped both of those together over the past 10 years and adjusted them both for inflation. And so though 2019 or 2020 has been an expensive year, since 2011, the median household has not been able to afford the median mortgage in Tofino, right? So there's clearly been a gap, and that gap is just increasing. More and more people are extending themselves beyond their financial ability or close to beyond their financial ability to enter the ownership market. We saw this as evidenced by the rate of core housing need amongst owners, which is 22%, which is quite high. I think typically we see a core housing need amongst owners at well under 10%, often under 5%. But in Tofino, that number is quite high. And we think that's because more owners are overextending themselves financially to get into the market, or are taking on larger homes with the expectation that they will be able to use one of the rooms or part of the home as an income generating property through a short-term rental. And again, yeah, 2021 widely expected to be the most expensive year that we've ever seen. So it's not just renters, it's also owners. Both are experiencing rates of insecurity, but the folks who are experiencing the highest rate of insecurity are single income households, lone parents, seniors or elders, and young people. So anyone who's already got a financial disadvantage, either because they've got one income or because they have the added burden of paying for childcare on top of only having one income, those are the folks that are struggling the most. Typically, couples with two incomes are the most able to weather a volatile housing market or expensive housing market, but in Tofino, even they are becoming more and more challenged to do so. To sum up, owners were generally worried about maintenance, cost of utilities, ability to age in place. Many were worried they'd have to leave their community as they got older. Renters, it's cost and availability always. And it's also really difficult to save when you are navigating an increasingly expensive rental market. And that means you're renting more expensive units for longer, which means you're saving less for your down payment, which means you're even less likely to generate that jump to ownership. All of this has been exacerbated by the cost of construction. It's really difficult to build new. It's even more difficult to build new and affordable. And private development and extending services is very, very expensive, even if you had the land to build into, right? So for us, expanding private housing options is one part of this solution, but really, unless a ton of new private housing options come to market relatively quickly, it's not going to alleviate any pressure in the market, and it's not going to reduce costs of ownership or costs of renting. So the market will always charge what the market can bear, and right now, people are more and more willing to spend more and more of their money to get into housing. So, oh, sorry, did I?
Excuse me, Mr. Mackey, just letting you know we're just at the 15-minute mark. So,
okay, sorry, This is great. We're right at the end here. So
perfect.
I will read this last quote here. Tofino has been our home for over 20 years. So we hope we can find a way to stay in this community. And I think for me, that points to these non-market housing options that you're doing through the THC. So I would suggest, continuing to build those dedicated, affordable, and appropriate rental options, especially the ones that are, funded through seniors levels of government, operated by a nonprofit or by a housing authority, and secured in perpetuity. And there are many ways to do that I think you're already doing it, including looking at land acquisition and disposal for that use and regional partnership. So that's it. I believe you've got a resolution on your agenda to receive this report tonight. We've already completed our staff capacity building, and there'll be information on a public information session where I'll basically be giving a very similar report to this, presentation to this for the members of the general public who wish to get more information. So that's it. I will say a special thanks to all the staff at the District of Tofino and to Aaron Rogers, especially for spearheading this project, and as well as our incredible community partners. So that's it. If anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Excellent. Thank you, Sandy. Council, questions, comments? Perhaps questions for Sandy? Councillor Steer, and then Councillor Anderson.
Yes. Thank you, Sandy. I appreciate the report. And unfortunately, none of that is surprising to us. I think we all were very well aware of everything that was in that report and the implications of it. I did just one question. There was two things, and I think you just alluded to in the last paragraph was what part of the project was to build capacity for staff, in essence, to in 5 years' time, that if appropriate, to be doing it in-house. And I'm wondering how that went. And then the second question, if I could, just in terms of the census data that is collected, of course, being a census year, and it seems like we're lagging in terms of our 5-year assessment. How critical is the updated census data that we would have received this year for you to do your work?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Steer. Yeah, two good questions. So I'll start with the capacity building. That was a 2-hour session with staff from all 5 participating communities where we went over where you can collect all of the census data. So it is publicly available either through BC assessments or either BC assessment, BC statistics, or a couple of other different sources. So we went through where all of that information is available and kept. We also shared information on how to use our custom basically, it's a spreadsheet that auto generates all of the graphs that you saw today and all of the other graphs that you're seeing in the report. So it's actually something where your staff can use it to generate comparisons between, Tofino and other communities within the West Coast, or Tofino and the ACRD, things like that. So that's the type of work that we did. Hopefully, with those documents and the instructions that we sent along, folks will be able to put together a meaningful approximation of what we did for this baseline report, which is a great segue into the second question about the census. So I think actually it may have even been today or tomorrow, the first batch of 2021 census data is coming out imminently. It won't give us everything we need to repeat this report. I think the first batch only includes high-level population figures. So how many people are in each community. It's not going to give us any information on tenure, on income brackets, on all of those things that we break things down into. I don't think it gives us the age cohorts necessarily. So it is great that that data is starting to come out, but we won't be able to do the full repeat of this report until the custom data set that BC Statistics procures for the purposes of these reports is available. My guess is that'll be next year. But one of the things we are going to do is myself and the rest of the consulting team are going to prepare a very brief memo that we can append to this report. And it'll just be, as soon as the cohort data is released, we will update our projections and basically just say, like, here's what we said in the report. Here's what the new data point for 2021 leads us to believe is actually going to be happening in 26. And here's how the changes may affect housing. It'll just be a couple paragraphs, but we'll do that as a sort of ongoing commitment to this work. And hopefully we'll have that for you in the spring. We'll see. But
Thank you.
no problem.
I think it was Councillor Anderson, then Councillor McMaster.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Steer sort of anticipated my question around, you know, what we will do in-house going forward and keeping this up to date. So I'll just comment that I'm really happy with the content of the report. It's really comprehensive, and it gives us a lot of useful information in terms of policy and suggestions of moving ahead regionally. So I'm really pleased that the report, how much further it went than our last housing assessment, and also offers better information how we might target housing to the most needed areas. So I just thank everyone that worked on it and express my pleasure with how well done it is, and the utility of the report will be, I think, great for all the region. Okay, thanks.
Perfect. Thanks, Councillor Anderson. I will pass that on to the team. I know they'll appreciate it.
Councillor McMaster, and I believe Councillor Thick had her hand up as well.
Thanks, Sandy. That's an excellent report. What I really enjoyed was the compilation and presentation of the data in a graphical format. One of the things I encounter with being on the THC committee is talking to people of my generation in Tofino who continually tell me we don't need affordable housing. It's always been tough. It's always been expensive. It was just as tough in my day to find a place to live. And I think the graph showing the division between the median cost of housing and the median salaries is going to help me a lot. So thanks for that.
Great. Well, that's one you can thank your staff for. That idea came from Aaron and Bruce at Tofino and Cutlery, who had that idea for that graph. So you can thank them. We just put it on the page.
Thanks, Aaron.
Councillor Thick.
Yeah, I just want to echo my thanks, as the other councillors have just said, and I too, even though it took hours to go through it all, I found it incredibly well written, very succinct, informative, and as others have said, the graphs were particularly useful. And I think that we will, over the course of time, really be able to tease out the parts that are going to help us going forward. But one question I had was, I was particularly interested in there was many comments about the short-term rental question, and you, in the highlights, I believe you alluded to that, but it was kind of at the bottom of the list, and that's something I'm interested in. I just wondered, and I think you gave a couple of suggestions, but can you unpackage that just a little bit more in terms of, I think you said monitoring and, I think trying to keep the lid on the short-term rental situation in Tofino. Do you have any more definitive examples of best practices from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, it is something that a lot of communities in British Columbia are dealing with right now. In terms of, policy and bylaw development, it's relatively low-hanging fruit at the moment because there are so many options for you to sort of pick and choose off of a menu. The big thing that we always recommend is before looking at a policy option, figure out what your problem is. And in a lot of cases, the problem may be that folks are, being disruptive and making too much noise, in which case you need a bylaw that will, strengthen your ability to, monitor noise complaints and what's your sort of framework for actually penalizing people who break those things, right? That's one option of maybe what a problem would be. In your case, the issue is obviously available and affordable rentals, and the fact that Airbnbs and VRBOs and similar short-term rentals are potentially taking up units that could otherwise be in your affordable housing market, or at least in your rental stock. They may not be affordable, but at least they would be units that people could be accessing. So that's the thing that you want to monitor. What is the prevalence of commercial short-term rental options? So when we define commercial, we define them as units that are available more than 50% of the days in the year. These are units that are not being used as a home and someone is going away for a couple of weeks and renting them out. There are units that are purpose-built to be rented as short-term rentals and that are income-generating properties, not residential properties. So monitoring how many of those there are in your community, either through your host compliance software or through other data analysis tools. Are they increasing? Are they decreasing? And if they are increasing, what are the bylaws and policies you're going to in place to either limit them by, requiring temporary use permits or the other regulations that you have in place now, or even potentially decrease by looking at actual zoning that does not allow for short-term rentals. There's a number of different tools there once you actually have identified your problem and figured out what you want to limit. And I think that's something that staff is more than capable of preparing a report on for sure.
Thank you.
I do have a couple comments. If Councillor Chalmers, would you like to?
No, just everything that I have has been said and asked, and I appreciate the report. So thank you.
Great, thank you. First of all, I do want to echo. It's great to see certainly a much improved housing study, and I'm glad that it meets all the EBCM requirements. And of course, the general highlights for where Tofino is going with rental and non-market housing, etc., I think is quite excellent. That's the good. I do have some criticisms, and you actually, I think you touched on it at the very beginning, and that's the challenges with quantitative data. Mm-hmm. And for me, it goes a little farther than just the challenges with quantitative data. It's what we do with that data when we create policy. Now, I just want to bring up a couple highlights that I see in the report that I would have questions about, and then would love to see it sort of looked at a little closer. For instance, the population household groups. We have 0 to 14. That's 0 to 14 years old. So that's a group with 14 years. The next one's 15 to 24, which is a 9-year gap, which includes, of course, children, as well as, restaurant workers en masse. And there doesn't seem to be a difference. There's no differentiation. In fact, in one part of the report, it looks like the 15 to 24-year-old group was divvied up into couples living together or single people living alone. And I thought that's an odd way to look at high school students. And so just to highlight one point about that, and then also to make the connection between the fairly low population of teenagers, essentially somewhere between 0 and 14 and 15 and 20, and and make the connection between the negative growth of the group that would most likely contain their parents, which is 45 to 64. And I didn't really see that connection made or what that means. And I just want to say one more thing. And of course, this is all in the context of my one criticism of the difficulty of quantitative data is your comment on weathering the insecurity, housing insecurity. And you noted that couples with two incomes could weather the storm better, two incomes with a couple children. And I just note with the data, just quickly looking through the data, I did read it a couple times, the whole report, but it is that maybe it looks that they're weathering that housing insecurity because they simply aren't here, because they've moved. And that seems to be what the data may see. And so for me, it raises the suspicion of survivor bias. Is that what we're looking at is the population that's actually making it and maybe missing the population that is simply not here anymore. So that's my one comment, and that has to do with dealing with quantitative data. But having said that, I'm fully in support of the general highlights, but I would like to see a little bit more of that, and then throw it out to council to say, when we're using data to make policy decisions, to think about those things and realize that we're not passive actors, that we're actually engaged in making changes. And if there is a missing subsector or a subsector hit so hard that they're simply not here, maybe we need to look at that. But that would be all covered under the general highlights anyway. So that's just a comment on quantitative data and thinking a little bit broader about that data and what it means. So long-winded comment on data, but thank you very much for this. It is overall a great report, and I appreciate the recommendations and look forward to working further on multiple forms of housing.
Great. Yeah, it was a pleasure to do it. I think really exciting to be working in a community that is that gets it, right? That has an understanding of what needs to change and understanding of their role in changing it. And for us, that's where we get the most enjoyment, and it's the the type of projects that we choose to take on, because it's rewarding to see some of the work go into practice. So I appreciate your effort, and I appreciate the effort of your staff, and looking forward to working with you hopefully in the future.
Super, excellent. I'm sure we will work together again.
So.
Thank you very much. So we need a recommendation. Would somebody like to move the recommendation? Councillor Thick, go ahead.
Move that the District of Tofino Housing Needs Report be received for information and discussion.
Seconded by Councillor McMaster. Any further comments? All in favor? Motion's carried. I should say none opposed. Motion's carried. Great. Moving on. 10.2 Development Variance Permit for 1367 Chesterman Beach Road. And we have a report from Community Sustainability. Maybe Miss Patterson. I think you're on mute.
Let's try that again. Good evening. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight, I'm going to be presenting a development variance permit application. So I'm just going to share my screen. All right, so the development variance permit that I'm presenting is for 1367 Chesterman Beach Road. And this is on behalf of Tofino Vacations Incorporated. The subject property, as mentioned, is 1367. So it's a waterfront property located within the RA1 zoning, acreage residential district, is within the Peninsula Land Use Designation for low density residential. The variance is to permit the construction of a caretaker cottage, which exceeds the zoning limit of 0.81 meters or 2.65 feet. No other variance is required for this proposal. And I've just included a shot of the survey. As you can see, the proposed cottage is going to be located in the top left corner of the lot. That's roadside. Through our evaluation, the structure generally aligns with the OCP objectives. The design generally aligns with the community vision. The structure conforms to the zoning guidelines for siting, setbacks, and size, with the exception of height, and it meets the Zone 1 flood construction level of 6.1 meters. Public notification was sent out for this variance, and up until the deadline, I had 1 phone call and 2 letters of opposition from neighboring properties and 0 response and support. Staff recommend that we approve the variance as presented in development's variance permit 0222 is attached in the report. And that is very short and succinct, but I am available for questions and comments if you have them.
Great. I do it. Well, go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, just a question on what was the nature of the opposition? Did it have any specific issues, or was it just general opposition to the height alone? So.
Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you. General opposition to the height. I think that with any height variance could be a bit of a contentious variance. And with this one, given it was a negligible amount, I did have communications with some of the property owners to answer some of their questions about how this height was impacted by the flood construction level. And so yeah, it was just generally height.
Thank you.
Further questions for Ms. Patterson? Councillor Thick.
I too have a couple of concerns with this one, and I wasn't quite understanding why it needed to be. It has something to do with the crawl space, the crawl space, as I understand, but I wasn't quite sure how the size of the crawl space impacted the need for the variance to be triggered. If you could just explain that again.
Absolutely. So I was anticipating this as a bit of a confusing thing to try and articulate in the written report. So I'm just going to share my screen again, and I've done up a couple slides just to sort of help explain how this will look. Okay, so in sort of understanding how, I'm going to back it up a little bit. So the flood construction level was brought into play when we adopted the floodplain bylaw. And so how that's going to affect the building height in various zones is that every zone is subject to a differing flood construction level. And so in this particular region, there would be varying elevations from lot to lot. And in this lot in particular, if we go back, actually, I'm going to put back to the survey, the average natural grade that we measure the building height from is identified on here in the red circles. So we have an average natural grade that varies from 4.4 meters to 4.8. So that's how we determine our average natural grade. And then if we flash forward to the slide here, we can see that the 6.1 meter, the 6.1 meter elevation is related to that average natural grade. So I'm not sure if I'm making this better or worse, but we scaled it out. So looking at that 6.4 meter elevation from the top of the floor to the roof peak, we determined that to be 7.01 meters. And then how that height is impacted is the average or the difference between the average natural grade and that 6.4 meter elevation of the top of the floor. So that's where we get the 1.8. So if we were to look at this, the same building on a different lot, we would say we're looking at a 5.41 meter average natural grade. This would actually reduce the height of the crawl space. So now that 5.41 meters minus, sorry, the 6.4 meters minus the 5.4 would give us a difference of 0.99. And then that 0.99 is added to the 7.01, giving us a building height of 8 meters. So now you can see that the elevation is actually higher, but the building height is lower. So the plans for this development were secured long before the floodplain bylaw came into play, and the crawl space height is adapted to whatever that average natural grade or the finished grade would be, so that there's always an expectation that that crawl space will be higher or lower depending on how high they need to build the foundation. But given that they needed to build up to this 6.1 meter to meet that flood construction level, it meant that that crawl space or that calculation of the 0.99 or sorry, the 1.8 meters had to be added on. So when we're talking about the actual building elevation, the total elevation is the same, whether or not it is on an average natural grade of 5.41 or if it's on an average natural grade of 4.6. I'm not sure if that's if that helps, but there was an expectation when the floodplain bylaw came into play that we would see some of these buildings being impacted by that elevation requirement, and we knew that there was going to be such few numbers that we would be able to address them through the variance process, and this is an example of that.
So what you're saying is that the plans were made and they were made on plans that existed prior to the floodplain mapping bylaw came into effect and now cannot be changed.
There's a prefabricated set of plans, I believe. And so the building height did meet the zoning limit, but then given that the engineer's report came back and said that their floodplain elevation, or sorry, with the floodplain bylaw said that 6.1 meter was where their main floor had to sit, it meant having to build that additional height in the crawl space.
Right. And one other question, if I may, further to Councillor Anderson's question, the opposition included then 3 people, 2 neighbors or 3 neighbors to the property. Is that where the opposition comes from?
Yeah, direct neighbors, direct neighboring properties, one across the street and then one just slightly up the street, and then one direct neighbor.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for Ms. Patterson? Let's see, Councillor McMaster. You're on mute.
I'm still not comfortable with this. Could they not just augment the design to meet the height requirements? I mean, that looks like an awfully tall living room.
That was an option, was for a redesign of the building. So the applicants were given 2 options. They could apply for variance or they could fully redesign the home. But because it was prefabricated, it would mean that they would have to fully redesign all of the construction specifications.
Is that good for you, Councillor McMaster? Or would you like to carry on? Carry on.
No, it's not changing my opinion.
Okay. I personally I mean, I have no questions. I thought it was an excellent report, and I appreciated your explanation there, and it did make a lot of sense to me. And with that in mind, we can move to the recommendation, and then we can have comments about it amongst council within the motion. Who would like to move the recommendation? Councillor Chalmers.
Sure, I'll move the council approved development variance permit number 02-22 attached as appendix 1 to this report to vary District of Tofino zoning bylaw number 770/1997 for lot 2, district lot 274, Clayoquot district plan 16686, PID 004-020-227 as follows. Very part 4.16C of the District of Tofino zoning bylaw number 770/1997 to increase the maximum height of caretaker cottage from 8.0 meters, 26.25 feet to 8.81 meters, 28.9 feet.
We have a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Anderson. Great. Now is a good time if you guys want to discuss this, make your comments. Councillor Thick, we do want to keep it within time limit.
Yeah. Also, I had a comment for the planner. How?
Oh, we're in the motion. Sorry, Councillor Thick. Point of order. We were in the motion, so you've got to restrict your comments to council.
All right. Well, I'm also having trouble supporting this with the opposition from the immediate neighbors. So that's how I feel about it right now. Thank you.
Anybody else want to make a comment? No comments. Councillor McMaster.
I won't be supporting this. I feel if you're a neighbour, you expect and hope that if something gets built, that they're going to comply with the regulations. And I wonder why we have all these building regulations if we're not going to stick to them.
Thank you, both of you. Any further comments from council? My own opinion is this is go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I'm going to support this because the height is not, we're talking about less than a meter. So it's a negligible amount. It is driven by our own regulations that forced it to be taller. And I think that we can be a little bit flexible on that. And as staff has pointed out, we may expect to see more of these. And I guess going forward, I would kind of want to look into that a bit more and see what sort of impacts and what other places around the district might be impacted by our new floodplain bylaw, and whether or not we shouldn't maybe increase height restrictions in some of those areas, because we're going to be looking at it, and a number of buildings being built either on a higher, in this case it's crawl space, but buildings might be built up on stilts and so on. And I think we're well aware of the fact that we may be going into a future of higher sea levels, and so we should take that into account.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Anybody else? Okay. Personally, I think this is a fair use of a variance, noting the new floodplain bylaw and noting the extensive understanding of how it actually relates to the building height. And I understand that the neighbors were in those discussions, probably understand that as well. And that going forward, I think, in my opinion, that this will be a bit of an anomaly, that new buildings will have to take into consideration the floodplain at the beginning of planning. So that's my point. So I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? 4 in favor, 2 opposed. Motion is carried. Thank you. Moving on to 10.3. We have a building amendment bylaw number 1256, etc. for step code 3. And I believe we have a report from community sustainability. Our building inspector, Mr. Henderson, nice to see you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Can everybody hear me? Okay, I'll start to share my screen. Forgive the amateurish beginning to my presentation. So this evening, I'm pleased to present the, on behalf of Community Sustainability, a building bylaw amendment that will bring the BC Energy Step Code Steps 3 to Tofino. In 2019, the District of Tofino adopted a step code policy that outlined a timeline for adoption, and we've been roughly on the mark. This year, we're just a week late, but better late than never. BC Energy Step Code addresses the energy efficiency of buildings. It's a performance-based approach as opposed to the building code simply telling you exactly what you need to do for installation and mechanical energy use intensity. You have a set of performance metrics that you just have to meet. So there's no prescriptive values for insulation. If you wanted a large amount of windows on one side of your house, you can offset that kind of heat loss by increasing insulation in other walls or your roof or under your floor. So it does allow for a lot of flexibility in design. Step code in Tofino will apply by and large to houses. Simple houses mainly. Other simple buildings, such as small commercial, have other energy efficiency pathways that apply to it. It will also apply to Part 3 buildings, so large Part 3 buildings, but just kind of given the nature of our zoning bylaw, what we anticipate is that the only Part 3 building that step code will apply to is going to be apartment buildings. So if there's a future apartment building, they will have to meet step 3 of the BC Energy Step Code. In the last few years, builders and designers have easily transitioned to step code. In my experience, builders in the last year have often met step 2 or 3 with little or no change to their current construction methods, but small changes in design, construction methods, or mechanical equipment can easily push many homes that were built this past year into step 3 or higher steps. So there doesn't seem to be any difficulty with the local construction industry meeting the need to have a step code house. And there was initially concern a few years ago that there might not be enough energy advisors to meet the demand, but it seems like that hasn't been a problem. We even have a couple of local energy advisors that are regularly submitting their reports in with building permit applications. And they're on the island, there are several more. So I haven't ever heard that there's been a difficulty finding an energy advisor. At this time, I can take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Exciting. Question, Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we're on the same timeline trajectory as other municipalities in the region. And yeah, you might not know the answer to that one, but I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. Thank you. We're roughly in line with many other municipalities across BC. We're even a year or two behind several. Victoria, several municipalities around Vancouver, like North Vancouver, Squamish, several small towns, Kimberley. They all kind of hit step 3 probably last year, and several more have similar policies to ours that will adopt step code in around January, February of 2022. So I'm actually pretty excited to see, in the next month, how many different municipalities actually follow their policy and adopt step 3.
Good to know. Thank you.
Seeing no other comments, would somebody like to read the motion? Councillor Thick.
Move that the District of Tofino Building Bylaw Amendment Number 1256.03/2022 attached as Appendix 1 to the report titled Building Bylaw Amendment Step Code 3, dated February 8th, 2022, be introduced and read a first, second, and third time.
Seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any further comments? Thank you very much, Mr. Anderson. All in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion is carried.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Moving along, now we have zoning amendment bylaw 1302-2020. This is Olsen Road, the CBT development. Mr. Thick.
Hello, Mayor and Council. I'll just be sharing my screen briefly here. All right, so hopefully you're all looking at the screen that says Zoning Amendment 301 Olsen Road. This presentation is related to the report that appeared on Council's agenda, considering third reading for the rezoning application at 301 Olsen Road. This is for the Tla-o-qui-aht Biosphere Trust.
Peter, I think your slides, I'm seeing your notes as well. I don't know.
Oh, interesting. I have two screens now and it's kind of sharing one. I actually don't have any notes. Let me just see if I can flip this around.
It's not the usual screen. There's the
right. I see.
To your right, there's the notes section and the next slide. I don't know if that's the way this one is or not.
Just give me 1 sec. Let me just start this from the beginning.
There it is. There it is.
There you go. How's that looking?
That's good. Thanks.
All right. Yeah, no problem. Thanks for the heads up. I won't delve into too much of the background on this application. It's appeared before Council a few times already, and there's been much discussion. But just as a brief refresher, this rezoning application is intended to facilitate the development of an institutional, kind of office community space building for the Tla-o-qui-aht Biosphere Trust. This is right on the corner of Campbell Street and Olsen Road. The public hearing, this is kind of the most recent development, was that the public hearing was held on December 14th of 2021. And it's also worth noting that a housing agreement has been developed between the applicant and district staff and solicitors. This applies to the two residential units that are proposed for the development. Should this application successfully be granted third reading, my next presentation will be regarding that housing agreement. A brief overview of the public hearing, of the letters that were received by staff prior to the public hearing. 8 were in opposition, 39 were in support, and 4 were neither explicitly in opposition or support, but more offered general comments. And at the hearing, 3 members of the public spoke in opposition of the proposal, 8 spoke in support, and 1 offered, again, more general comments, neither specifying whether they were in opposition or support of the proposal. Outside of that, there isn't a lot of new information related to the proposal that I have to bring forward for Council's consideration today. Much of the engineering and other kind of considerations have been considered at earlier readings. There's been no changes to the bylaw. And at this point, the major difference between second reading and third reading has been the public hearing that occurred on December 14th. Should the application move forward today, our next step would be to consider the housing agreement. Typically, if there's a housing agreement associated with a rezoning application, we introduce it at third reading and do the first 3 readings of the housing agreement so that when the rezoning is brought back for consideration of adoption, we're ready to adopt the housing agreement at the same meeting. And the one other outstanding item that will be completed between third and fourth readings, again, should the application move forward today, is a development agreement. This development agreement is going to likely take the form of a covenant that will ensure that the building has sprinklers, maintains the proposed form and character that's been presented to Council throughout this rezoning application, and ensures that the driveway entrance is located as far from Campbell Street as is possible. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or if there's any comments or other things like that that I can help out with, more than happy to speak to those.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thick. I think noting the complexity of this, I'm going to open it up to Council for comments and questions, and specifically, maybe even a little discussion in case we have to bring in Mr. Thick or Mr. Rogers for comment on our discussion. So I am going to open it up to council. I do have a couple comments, questions. Nobody. Okay, Councillor Thick, and then Councillor Steer.
Yeah, I think reading the report and hearing the summary of the public hearing was helpful for me. And I realize there is some opposition to this, but it was very much about a 3-to-1 or more than that if you add the public hearing. So I feel personally comfortable with the addition of the recommendations that we're hearing today to proceed. So just thank you for looking at those details in that report with the extra things added. Thanks.
Councillor Steer.
Yeah, and this is open for the comments section. Thank you, Mayor Law. Because I did struggle with this rezoning. As everyone has noted, it has been a difficult one, personally, because we know almost all of the players that are involved. And because on the one hand, you have the legitimate concerns of the immediate neighborhood. And then on the other side, you have a broad regional and local support for the proposed use of the land. And fundamentally, for me, it came down to being a question on the usage of land. And we're being asked, is the proposed change of zoning from its current to the institutional comprehensive development, which was to facilitate as Mr. Thick pointed out, an office building, community space, and 2 residential units. And so I had to focus on what council is being asked in terms of the usage of that land. And so on balance, when listening, I was not at the public hearing, but I reviewed the video and of course all the written submissions. And the balance of the opposition, it was not so much the specific use of the land that was in question. It was more on the scope and scale of the physical building itself, which of course is part and parcel of it, but the specific use of the land did not seem to be the major opposition. There were many concerns related to the physical building and some of the traffic issues that might be associated and the off-street parking. And so, after consideration of the written and oral submissions, the staff reports that has come to this, I too will support the third reading of the zoning amendment bylaw.
Thank you, Councillor Steer. Other councillors? Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I would have to say that I really struggled with this as well. And whenever we're looking at a zoning amendment, I always have to remind myself to go back to the basic question, which is the land use. And I think it is an appropriate land use for there. Its impact on the neighborhood will be less than commercial. But then the second part of it, of that whole land use question, is the actual building and it's the situation, how it will be situated on the lot, and the massing of the building itself. And that's where I really went back and forth on the decision to move ahead with this. I will be supporting it on balance. I think it's a good use, and it's a tough one though. The tipping point for me really was some of the stuff that just came forward now with the staff report about working with the developer to move that building as much as possible away from Campbell Street. And I hope that we can work as best as we can to situate the building as low in the lot as possible, and to make sure that we don't lose any parking when we do that. So if we can accomplish all those things, I'm in support. And I'd have to echo Councillor Steer's comments as well. It was a real struggle for me and I talked to lots of people who weren't at the public hearing or didn't put their opinions forward, and I received the same sort of division around an opinion on it. So it was a difficult one.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor McMaster.
Yeah, this has been a tough one for me as well. I've flip-flopped all over the place. I mean, I wonder what the decision would be if it wasn't the CBT, thinking about past decisions we've made. I don't think the concerns about the mass of the building have been alleviated. Regardless of the traffic report, I still see there being issues, and I think parking's going to still be a problem. Having said that, you know, CBT is probably going to be one of the better neighbours you could have. I have no idea what CBT's finances are like, but notice that the building next door to the proposed CBT building is now for sale, and I don't know whether they have the money to purchase that, but then if they did, they could perhaps build a building that didn't have the mass and also have more parking, which would sort out that problem. But I'll support it with some hesitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McMaster. I'm not, Councillor Chalmers, would you want to speak it?
Sure, I'm in support of it. I think everything that I have to say also has been said. I think the CBT's worked hard to make changes. I understand the concerns from the neighbors, but I think that it will fit with the zoning when we're looking at the land use. So I am in support of it.
Thank you. Councillor Thick? Or sorry, Mr. Thick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to make one note in response to Councillor Anderson's comments. I believe he mentioned that the building may be pulled away from Campbell Street. I think the building that's been presented to council throughout this rezoning application will be maintained more or less as it has been presented. That's something that will be secured through the development agreement. So I just wanted to clarify that it's unlikely that the building will be pulled any further away from Campbell Street. It'll likely front onto Campbell Street in order to increase as much space as possible to the adjacent residential property. And I just wanted to clarify that the development agreement will ensure that the form and character of the building kind of is maintained with what's been presented here to council. The one portion of the overall site layout that will be pulled as far from pulled as far from Campbell Street as possible will be the entrance. That's the driveway, just to as much as possible avoid any potential issues with the traffic. So I just wanted to clarify that based on Councillor Anderson's comments.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. My comments are going to say this was it took a lot of work for me to work through this and find a rational, reasonable decision. I think I agree with all of you that the land use itself, for me, posed a little problem. I think it was the unique situation in the Crab Dock neighborhood that gave me the most pause, and I did flip flop because of that. And I looked very closely at parking traffic, and the massing and size. And one of the issues I looked at was what is possible now, and I looked at the data on what's there. It could be a duplex, which would mean 4 suites, and looking at the data from the last few years, 5 years or so, that's a very good chance it would be a staff accommodation at the very least, and have whatever it would be as a resident. So for me, some of those comments from the immediate neighbors, which I took to heart, I looked at it, and ultimately I came to the conclusion that the CBT itself and the use of the building and the traffic and parking would be in some ways a good neighbor on whole. The one issue I do have is still size and massing. And I've noticed that throughout the presentations, this building has maintained a proposed height of, I believe it's 10.61 meters. The bylaw in front of us allows a height of 12 meters. And noting that from the beginning, council has expressed concern, at least the majority of council has expressed concern about about height and massing, which essentially has not been addressed in council. I understand it was addressed before it was brought to council, but not in council in proper. I have a hesitation to fully support this unless there was a stronger language in the bylaw itself that would ensure that this building did not go to 12 meters, that it stayed within what CPT has proposed from the beginning, which is 10.61 meters. And so I'm going to throw it out to council because it sounds like we've got support, CPT has support. I sense some hesitancy, and the hesitancy is around mass and sizing. If council would like me to talk to staff about making an amendment to the bylaw to ensure that the size does not go to 12 meters as is presently allowed within the bylaw. Mr. Thick?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think maybe I'll just jump in with one quick comment at this point. The bylaw was drafted based not on the proposed size for the building, but based on what the applicant requested. So their initial plan, I believe, did show a height of approximately 10.6 meters from the average natural grade. As this is a sloping lot, the average natural grade is calculated approximately in the middle of the lot. So that doesn't mean it's going to be 10.61 meters off of the curb adjacent to Campbell Street, but it'll be more approximately 10.6 meters from the middle of the lot. Often when we do comprehensive development zones, we allow a little bit of wiggle room. So that was approximately why we kind of set the setbacks where they're supposed to be and also set the height where it is. This was something that was requested by the applicant at their initial application stage, so as early as permission to proceed. And we drafted the bylaw based on those requests. Largely, these are not uncommon requests due to the complexities of building these kinds of buildings on sloped lots. Often at the zoning stage, it's very difficult to be precise about the exact height of a building when you haven't done any sort of excavation work, you haven't done any sort of foundation work, and the complexities of building a building of this size often demand that there's a little bit of wiggle room in order to accommodate the actual construction process. It is not impossible to, of course, change the bylaw to reflect the 10.61 height that's being at least at this point, proposed by the applicant. However, it may simply mean that the applicant will come back at a later date and seek a variance for an extra couple of feet of height if that's necessary. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of background information as to why the bylaw has been drafted as it has been up until this point. Though I understand your concerns and I'm happy to speak anymore if you have additional comments.
Thank you, Mr. Thick. I do understand that. I would prefer to have the bylaw specific and then have CBT come back for a variance if they have to or want to. Just noting the central difficulty both council and residents immediately have had with the height. So, in the end, if there's no difference, I prefer personally, and then I'm looking to council, I would prefer to see this nailed down. And then if it is go higher, then they have to seek a variance. That would be my personal preference. But Councillor Chalmers.
Yeah, I would prefer it to stay as is and to support it that way. I think it's a lot to ask, as it has gone through permission to proceed and all the steps, and it's been there for us to see from the beginning. Additionally, it's not simple to just ask to go through variance. I think it's asking a lot of an applicant that's already been working quite hard on the application as stated. So I am comfortable with it as it is and would prefer to address it right now.
Well, then I'm looking to council. I would have to say that I don't believe council's issues with mass or height have been addressed at all in council meetings by the applicant. So that is why I think at this point I would like to see it happen. But I see Mr. Rogers on the phone here.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would echo what Mr. Thick has said about this application. We have looked at this application at 12 meters throughout the whole process, and one way to support that is that we will be using the applicant's design drawings as such as they are for our development agreement. And in that development agreement, we'll be able to include language such as in substantial conformance to the design considerations of the building, and have that covenant as a kind of our safety measure to ensure that the CBT is building that as low as possible. So it feels it's difficult for us, like while it's technically possible, it's difficult to do a bit of a hard stop or a hard turn at third reading. But again, as Mr. Thick said, it is possible technically. It's something that we would probably want to go back and have a conversation with the applicant to make sure 10.61 is a number. And again, when we start getting into that kind of conversation, we're starting to talk about hundreds of thousands of dollars in design costs and design work, because this is not a single family home. This is an institutional building with different occupancies and of some mass. So I'm not speaking to the massing and council's concerns around that. I'm just speaking more to the process that we followed and how we are hoping to constrain that building height significantly under 12 meters.
Thank you. Councillor Steer.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. Just so my understanding is, you could include language to somewhat constrain or to come in at that 10.6 in the development phase of the project. Is that my understanding?
Yeah, in the end,
rather than rewrite the bylaw.
Yeah, in the end, the bylaw is the bylaw. If it can't be done, 12 is kind of our limit, or if it had to go over 12, you have to come back for variance. But we can strongly encourage through the covenant, based on the design that's been provided to us and based on the numbers, that it be built as closely in accordance to that as possible. And so if someone were to breach that agreement, then we would perhaps have recourse to deal with that, either through strongly suggesting a redesign to get us closer to 10.61 meters. But again, I think it's more of it's for the CBT to hear and be a good neighbor and do what they said they would like to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just for clarity, Mr. Rogers, if with the 12 meter in the bylaw, if CBT were then to add, say, 6 inches to each floor on their design, would that trigger then, would you consider that a strong enough trigger to say no? Or are you saying, like, basically the building is to stay the same, but it just depends on the grade and where that is calculated from? So that's my question is, does this allow them to, in a sense, change their design to add a little bit of height to each floor to eke out that extra 1.5 meters?
Well, if we haven't written the development agreement yet, but if we write it, it'll say something like insubstantial conformance. So if something were to come back and say we're going to add 6 inches to each floor, we would ask for some kind of rationale why they need to in the first place, and say we have this thing that says, we have this agreement that says 10.61 or whatever that number is, and adding that extra 0.3 of a meter is a concern for us, and that's the kind of conversation we'd have with them. My assumption is that because of the level of design that we have seen, is that 10.61 is it's a somewhat accurate number. But as Mr. Thick noted, once we start digging in the ground and on a slope lot and in Tofino, that might change. It might end up being lower as well. At 12 is sort of our maximum that we're comfortable with, as we have gone through the process at 12 meters. But everybody's hoping for a lower number than that.
Any further comments from council? Thanks for answering my concern. So I take it, looking to council, request an amendment or no? I'm asking, would council go for requesting an amendment? It's just thumbs up or thumbs down? This is not a vote, I'm just looking. Thumbs down, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I see that's not in support. certainly hope CBT will do all they can to recognize the issue of height and mass in their building. Councillor Anderson, did you have something to say? Question, comment?
No, I was just going to comment on your question, whether or not to amend. And I think we've landed at the best place we can. And we have a developer that wants to do the best they can in a neighborhood and with their building. It's not a developer that is seeking to max out, their height or anything like that. So I think we have a cooperative developer, and we've worked long with planning staff and the developer to land at the best possible place. So I'm in support as it is.
Okay, without further comment, then I will call the question. All in favor? Or sorry, we haven't even read the motion yet. Jeez. Thanks for picking that up, everybody. Councillor Chalmers, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Sure. I'll move that the report attached as appendix. Oh wait, am I in the right one? Yeah, okay, sorry. I will move that the report attached as appendix 2 containing a summary of the nature of the representations respecting District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1302/2020 that were made at the public hearing be received by council and maintained as a public record, and that the zoning amendment bylaw number 1302/2020 be read a third time.
Seconded by Councillor Thick. Any further comments from council? All in favor? None opposed, motion's carried. You can go ahead there, Councillor Chalmers.
And I'll move that council withhold adoption of bylaw number 1302/2020 until a development agreement has been finalized to the satisfaction of the manager of community sustainability that confirms the proposed building will be sprinklered. The access will be located as far from Campbell Street along the Olsen Road frontage as is feasible, and the final design of the building will match in substantial conformance to the design presented to the council during the rezoning process.
Seconded by Councillor McMaster. Any further comments? Hearing none, all in favor? And none opposed, motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, just a moment here. Just a sec here. Sorry, I've got maybe something twice. No, I do have another one. Okay, 10.5, we have a housing agreement bylaw, and this is also Olsen Road. Mr. Thick.
Thank you, Mayor Law. I'll just be sharing my screen to go over some of the highlights of the agreement as well for this particular presentation. All right, so this presentation pertains to the brief report that was attached to Council's agenda regarding a housing agreement for 301 Olsen Road. This is again the Clockwood Biosphere Trust development mentioned in the previous presentation. So this housing agreement was requested by staff and council in conjunction with the rezoning application that's underway for the property. The rezoning application has just received third reading, and in anticipation of the potential adoption of the zoning bylaw, in order to line up this the adoption of this housing agreement bylaw, we would be considering 3 readings of the housing agreement bylaw today. Some of the highlights of the agreement includes the insurance that any structure built on the property must contain at least 2 employee housing units. These units can only be occupied month to month by an eligible tenant or tenants, as the case may be. No short-term rentals will be permitted of the units. An eligible tenant is defined as someone who is an individual employed by the CBT or a partner of the employee or other family member, a CBT contractor, a provincial or federal employee, or an employee of a Tofino business. So essentially, should no other applicable tenants be found that are employed by the CBT or contractors of the CBT is permitted to rent the units on a month-to-month basis to any individual that's employed by a business holding a valid Tofino business license. It's worth noting that in line with other private housing agreements, no maximum rental rates have been established for this particular housing agreement. This has been a fairly common practice, typically for district-led development projects that are intended to provide affordable housing. We will include maximum monthly rental rates within the housing agreement. However, for most sort of employee housing or privately operated units that are under housing agreements, we typically do not enforce maximum rental rates. So the next steps would be to consider first, second, and third readings today. And then the housing agreement bylaw will be brought back for consideration of adoption at the same meeting as adoption of the rezoning bylaw. As noted in the previous discussion and presentation, the rezoning bylaw will need to first have a development agreement worked out that outlines some of the considerations discussed in the previous report. And then at that point, it will be brought back for consideration of adoption. If there's any questions or comments, I'm happy to speak to them at this point.
Questions or comments from council? I see Councillor Steer.
Thank you, Mayor Law. Thank you, Peter. I had a couple of questions. One was on the number 3 on the eligible tenants. Employee of federal government, provincial government department, agency, or organization. And I'm wondering, is there a conflict with not including local government in that as well, as we are the district? But and so that was a question I had, why we could not include local government as well in that.
To be completely candid, I actually was thinking about the same thing myself. I'm not sure exactly what the specific reason was. This actual housing agreement was developed while I was on paternity leave. My understanding is that initially, I think the local government was a little bit hesitant to include themselves as potential recipients of the benefits of these housing units. Largely because I think that we didn't want to be seen as involved with development in any way. However, if Mr. Rogers has any comments on that, maybe I'll look to him to speak to them at this point.
Thanks. So I think you've got it exactly right. Yeah, we just wanted to keep a bit of an arm's length from this process.
Okay. Thank you. And if I could just have a quick follow-up around the affordability aspect when we ask for rent caps in essence. And you did explain a little bit. This seemed to me that this would be a project where we could include those rent caps in essence because of the nature of the institution that we're dealing with and the type of zoning that they've been asking for. I'm wondering if that was a discussion at the staff level, why we wouldn't include those rent caps for this particular project.
Certainly, a couple of things come to mind. As was noted in the presentation, typically for these kinds of private developments that include housing agreements, we don't include rent caps. So there's an issue of fairness in general. We haven't requested rent caps from other private developers of employee housing, such as resorts, who also maintain the benefit of a DCC reduction or some other types of benefits of actually having the rezoning approved as a result of that. Further, typically the organizations that are developing employee housing, they know how much they pay their employees and they know how much their employees are able to afford on a month-to-month basis in order for them to stay employed and stay living in Tofino. And typically rents for these types of private businesses or private organizations are reflected of that or reflective of that. And the third reason is a bit of an issue of capacity. It actually is quite difficult for the District of Tofino to enforce rent caps with regards to private developers. For the projects, for example, at 700 Sharp Road or District Lot 114, because those are being operated by nonprofit housing developers with specific mandates and specific requirements, and also with agreements with higher levels of government, there are many levels of oversight to ensure that the rent caps are actually being adhered to. For these kinds of private developments, it's a little bit more challenging to do that. And so that has been one reason why we've avoided them in the past. Again, all that being said, though, I would note that if that is something that council is interested in seeing included in this particular housing agreement, staff have no problem going back to speak with the applicants about that.
Thank you, Peter. That was a good explanation. It helped to clarify my own mind why we might not pursue with these particular developments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McMaster.
Yeah, just kind of a silly question, really. When CBT did the presentation, they mentioned that the staff accommodation may be used for guest lecturers when they come into town. You talk about in your presentation about monthly rentals. So if they had a guest lecturer who was only here for a couple of weeks, would that mean they couldn't rent out the place for the rest of the month or whatever, or for another month? I'm a bit unclear on that. I'm not even sure how we would enforce it anyway, but
that's, I would say, in the ballpark, fairly correct, because the stipulations of this housing agreement, which is a legal agreement, require them to rent on a month-to-month basis. If one of the tenants was only there for, say, 2 weeks as a visiting lecturer, the other 2 weeks of the month would likely either remain empty or be rented by another eligible tenant that would kind of pick up the last 2 weeks and then continue on into the next month. So it would be these units are also, my understanding is that I think they are 2-bedroom units as well. So it may be that one of the bedrooms is occupied long-term by an eligible tenant, and the other one may only be used for 2 weeks of the month. However, you are correct. It would have to be kind of on a month-to-month rental basis, and which may result in some vacancies at certain points of the month if they are only being used by individuals who are there for less than a month. Again, it would probably depend on the circumstance exactly how it would play out. However, we would be bound by the terms of the legal agreement and would be unable to make exception to that from a legal perspective.
yeah, I'm just not sure whether having an empty space is a good thing or a bad thing, actually. That's just my thought.
Thank you, Councillor McMaster. Councillor Steer.
Yeah, sorry, just a follow-up to my local government question. And local government just doesn't necessarily mean Tofino local government. We have other local governments, the ACRD, for example, and the District of Tofino, which is a local government, and they could be employees of those local governments and reside in Tofino. It was in my note. I just forgot to mention it. It didn't have to be specific to the District of Tofino, local government in general. So that was the comment I just wanted to throw in there just before I left off. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Steer. I think that would be something that may be worth including as well if council is looking for amendments, as it, again, it wouldn't, result in any perceived conflict on the District of Tofino's part, but may open up some opportunities for other local governments who are looking for accommodation should that opportunity arise.
Thank you, Mr. Thick. Any other comments from council on that particular idea of opening up the agreement to local governments? I'm happy with arm's length, personally, keeping the district out of this and local governments. I'm not sure if that would go, but council? Amendment? As is? Okay.
I'm as is, yeah.
Fair enough. Would somebody like to read the recommendation if there's no other questions for Mr. Thick? Councillor Thick.
Move that the District of Tofino Housing Agreement Bylaw number 1314, 2022 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time.
Seconder, Councillor Anderson. Any further comments? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. We have District of Tofino website refresh presentation. And this is a verbal report from corporate services. Hi, Ms. Best.
Hello, Mayor Law. Thank you, everyone. My name is Nikki Best. I'm the acting manager of corporate services, and I'd like to introduce our communications coordinator, Sarah Gray. She will be presenting with me this evening. So Sarah has a presentation deck that she will share her screen with for us. to get us started. Okay. So we are at the Tofino.ca website refresh presentation. There is no report because this is just going to be a visual experience to show you what our new website is looking like today, and it is fully launched. And we're very, very excited to show council and the public this new site, the refresh, and all the work that's gone into it over the last 9 months. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. Thank you. So just some background leading into this. My tenure started in April 2021. And before I started here, there was an RFP for a website contractor to provide a new updated website with some key elements that we needed. And so as I started in April 2021, that was when all the RFPs were received. So the former manager of corporate services, Elise Gocher-Bergman, the communications coordinator, Sarah Gray, and myself were the decision-making panel for the RFPs. We received over 25 submissions, which is a significantly high amount of submissions to do our website. So we had a lot of options to choose from contractors. We were spoiled, is what we could easily say. So Boldfish Creative was awarded the contract in 2021. And since then, beginning in May, we decided to move forward with the project. And we are now here today with a brand new website. One of the key elements we wanted to highlight is that this is a WordPress website, which means we have complete ability to edit, modify, and change our website. It is not a proprietary website backend, which is what our former website used to be. So we would have to actually have a specialized person to come in and do extra work for us to update or change our website, but now district staff can fully edit and update our own website without the use of external contractors. And that was one of the key components of the RFP. And so just another little bit of information. The intent of the new website is to provide improved services and access to information for public and other end users, as well as a site that can be substantially controlled and of course administered by our staff. The new site reflects a refreshed corporate brand. It also promotes transparent and accountable government and focuses on civic literacy and user experience for Tofino's residents, businesses, and partners. The website is optimized for desktop and mobile devices, so any person on their phone accessing our website shouldn't have any issues. And it provides an expected e-government tool. So that means accessible design features and integration with our existing calendar and agenda document storage software, which we use for our agenda packages right now. And searchable content. So now we have a search bar at the top of our website that not only searches our website, it also searches our document center and our Talk Tofino site. So all three platforms that we use to give information out to the public or engage with the public can be searched with our single search bar at the top of our site. Our new site can now also be edited, like I said, by our Tofino staff, and that is largely led by our communications coordinator, who was the project lead on this. And we're very happy to show you some of those features. So the next slide, please. This is just a really high level review of what we did for our project timeline. So I just wanted to put this out there that it took a lot of research, redrafting. We met with every department. When I say we, I mean our communications coordinator and our consultant. And there's lots of testing and migration and moving all of our old content, updating it to the new site, renaming. And now we're just in the launch period and we're reviewing and we're adjusting and we're training our staff. So beginning next month, we will be launching modules for each staff member to be able to edit their own areas and provide more content to the public with ease of access. So with that, I will hand this presentation over to Ms. Sarah Gray, who's going to give us a demo.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Yeah, I am very excited to be able to share a very small taster, I suppose, of what the extent of our very new, fresh website has to offer. So just in summary, before I go a little bit off course here and go through a live demo with you, I will be going through just an overview of the new sitemap, the new architecture, and the website structure, as well as Ms. Beth mentioned, our new search function, our I want to menu, as well as some new features and some refreshed processes in terms of our events calendar and meeting registrations. So bear with me one moment and I'm just going to switch my screen over and take you, hopefully, direct to our live site as it currently exists right now at tofino.ca. So hopefully you are now all seeing our new in-brand website. I will just start off by going through, as I said, the kind of restructure and reformat of our sections and that kind of summary of everything we do and the extent of what we do. So quite clearly here, we've got our community section, your government, public services, as well as our business and development. As Ms. Best already mentioned, this has been an extensive process in terms of, really analysing the extent of content we had on our previous site and really looking at how we can optimise that content and reformat and restructure to be able to represent it in a really user-friendly, content-focused way that makes the interaction on our site really easy and, in a nutshell, makes it easier for people to find what they're looking for. So that's ultimately the overview of the site architecture. We do have a few navigation features that were previously on our old site that again have just been slightly refreshed. So our I want to menu, which previously was within the main menu feature on the old site, now lives as a sub-menu feature, ultimately making that process of finding, attending council meetings, employment opportunities, business opportunities, council grants, bylaw. This really becomes the go-to quick navigation when you know exactly what you're looking for and will take you right where you need to go. Just directly beside our I want to menu, we do have our new search feature. We are still looking at options around the look and feel of this feature. However, what I would say is this has been probably one of the more challenging aspects of our new website is really creating a platform that not only, demonstrates the extent of what we do, but also acts as a launch pad to the other areas that we have relevant and important information that we want the community to know about. So with that, our search feature that is built off of Google does, as Ms. Best said, allow us to search various platforms that we own and operate. So for example, we are obviously, as everyone on this call is very much aware, in the midst of our budget planning. So if I was to do a quick budget search on our search tool, our search results here pull up in a very similar form to you would be used to seeing on a Google search. Through our tagging system, you are able to not only view all of the results here, but as well as filter through documents on our document center, direct on our tofino.ca website, as well as, of course, our Top Tofino platform. So this just really makes it really easy to find and know exactly where you're going to go as well when you click on those links. So I'll just momentarily exit from that search tool and take you down on our homepage to show you a few other elements that we've built into the new website. So our news and announcements section, you will, as you explore the new site, and I invite everybody to do so, you will notice news and announcements section that are shown throughout the website in various locations, and ultimately create, another realm for us to go in terms of our community engagement and our communications, and giving us an opportunity to celebrate, not just the processes that we go through, the council meetings, the highlights, but also an opportunity for us to celebrate the extent of everything we do in the community. As I continue down here, one of our newest features that is really different from anything we had on our previous site is the structure of our events calendar, which some of you may have already noticed has also now incorporated how you register and sign up for council meetings, events and such. So on our homepage, this just has a summary of upcoming events in February. And again, I'll just quickly take you through this. So as you can see, our Budget 2022 Town Hall for February 16th, users can quite simply just click directly. And of course, because I'm sharing my screen, there's going to be a slight delay here. There we go. you can just click on those events and have a pop-up of that event where users can just quite easily click to register. That will take you straight to that Zoom registration link that we were previously familiar with. I'll just close out of that. So that ultimately is the highlights overview. I will just momentarily take you in to give you a little bit of a breakdown on some of our main pages and what to expect as you dive into it. So each section, you know, as you explore, most will have, you know, some highlights that, again, as Ms. Best highlighted here, that we have full control and the ability to swap out content and images and you know, really adjust what we choose to display and focus on, dependent on time of year and really what activities are going on throughout the community, as well as their community news showing on each page, being relevant to things within that section. So for example, here you can see our Sort and Go Organics is also highlighted on this section due to it being, you know, falling under our community as a section. And I will just one more page to jump into. So let's go for recreation. If we jump in there, this is really what you can expect when you dive into those main section pages. One of the features that we have tried to incorporate as a consistency throughout the website is the addition of our contacts and quick links section. This really clean, quick navigation is intended to make it really quick and easy for users to access some of that, you know, more immediate information that they may be looking for when they initially land on that site, while also allowing them to collapse that section if they choose to continue and focus on some of the other content highlighted there. So that concludes the live demo.
Ms. Gray, can we just highlight one more item that I think is really important? It's the font size and how we can adjust that. So we've also made this website accessible. So for those that have to zoom in or have larger font on your website, this is an automatic button system that is on every page that increases the font size. So if you have different needs for reading, you can adjust your font size on your pages just by clicking there. Thank you.
I will just stop sharing there. And I believe I just have one final slide just to jump back to here momentarily. And that is our future website applications. In summary of this, you know, a website project is never really complete. You never put something out there and leave it be and let it go. It really is the starting point for more opportunities in terms of how we improve community engagement, or sorry, increase community engagement while making our user experience on the website that much better. A few things to note here is that we have already began conversations around options for online payments, specifically in relation to some bylaw services options. We do also have, there will be some more updates on the website this coming Friday in relation to how our newsletter sign up functions and collects information in relation to our mailing list through MailChimp. So that's something to look forward to later in the week. And finally, most importantly, from my end, the website is fully optimized, it's fully set up and linked and collecting, you know, all that important information we need through Google Analytics, which really allows us to know, you know, how many people are accessing our website, what information is most users are looking for, as well as identifying opportunities and areas, as I said, for improvement. Because yeah, with any service, there's always that opportunity to streamline and improve that experience further. So thank you. And that finishes my portion up. If Ms. Best has anything further to add.
I don't believe so. So thank you very much. And I think our last slide is just the questions, comments. We are happy to field them.
Thank you. Love having a new website, gotta say. Councillor McMaster.
Yeah, it looks great. as far as I'm concerned, any improvement in the search function is a plus, because our previous search function sucked, to put it bluntly. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Much better search function. Still some, you still got to work at it. Councillor Thick and Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, thank you very much. I particularly enjoyed the fact that you have our community right at the front of that page. I think that's really important, that we show people that we are community first and foremost. So I just want to say I really appreciate that.
Super. Councillor Steer, did you have your hand up, or are you just reaching for your button? Or you just throwing the computer around?
No, I had to put my power thing in, but I did want, while I'm here, I might as well just thank them. It was great. I'm your kind of your test person, so if I can navigate your site, you guys are doing all right, and you are doing all right. And Nikki, I love the font size option, because it's becoming, amazingly, it's become really important these days. So thank you all. I know it's a tremendous amount of work, and it's great.
Thank you. And just one last comment, just that our contractor, Boldfish Creative, was really wonderful to work with. Long hours, many meetings with our project lead, Ms. Sarah Gray. So it was a great project overall, and we're very happy with the work of our consultants. So
excellent, great work. Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, just I was pleasantly surprised when I went to our website with a question. Found it really easy to navigate, and yeah, I didn't know I would land on the new website when I went searching for District of Tofino. But yeah, so that was great. My question is, can people expect to find all the information in terms of if you wanted to look up old minutes to a meeting or some of our records and things like that, or are we still loading information onto it?
I can take that question if you like, Ms. Gray. Yes. Yes. So our document center, which is our Civic Web, and iCompass, which is our meeting software, is the document center, basically. So every council meeting, all of the bylaws are automatically put into that system as we build our council packages. So if they are using the search function on our website, you're automatically searching all of our documents, bylaws, previous council minutes, which have been uploaded. Now there is, years before technology, before website, that we existed as a district, that would be a large scanning project for a staff member to put everything digitally. But because we do have lots of information access, if anyone needs a bylaw or minutes or anything, those are permanent records that are on a routine list for disclosure. So anyone in the public can always just request those from corporate services, and we can deliver them same day. So if there's anything not on the website that you would like to see, or things that you wish were there, please let us know. We are very open to hearing all the feedback, good, bad, wishes, hopes, dreams. We would like to make that happen on our website if we can.
Great, thanks.
If I just may add to that comment, in terms of the search tool functionality, it ultimately works the exact same way as Google, being a Google search bar, in that it searches on keyword. So ultimately, the second you type in that word, Google gets to work, and it is looking through any documents in our document center, any mention in Tla-o-qui-aht, as well as some of those news style posts. So you are really getting a full extent of the information that is available on those three platforms.
I just want to ask one more question, I guess. As councillors, we get a lot of questions about government that isn't necessarily the municipality, around recycling, that's regional district. And so when people have those kind of questions, do they have those links to regional district questions, or things that maybe people think is the municipality but might not be?
So yeah, just to answer that, in terms of garbage and recycling, if you were to land on our garbage and recycling page within the District of Tofino website, under that quick links and contacts section, you will be directed to the appropriate location. And I think in terms of how we've rewritten a lot of that content, there's certainly more clarity in that. And particularly in relation to the garbage and recycling, I am already in conversation in terms of, you know, the Sort and Go program that's rolling out and how we really keep that communications clear and consistent between our website and what is, you know, on ACRD, for example.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's move on to single-use item regulation amendment bylaw. And this is for Cutlery. There's no presentation and maybe, so no questions, I'm sure, from council, but perhaps a couple comments before we move right into the motion. Or maybe not. I think it's great. If there's no comments, let's move right into the motion. Would somebody like to read the motion?
I'll make the motion that the District of Tofino single-use item regulation amendment bylaw number 1277-01 2022 be given first, second, and third reading.
Seconded by Councillor Chalmers. Any other comments? All in favor? Unanimous. Motion's carried. Excellent. Bylaw. Housing Agreement Bylaw number 1289 for adoption. Would somebody like to read that recommendation? Read the motion. Councillor Chalmers, go ahead.
I'll move that the District of Tofino Housing Agreement Bylaw number 1289.02 2022 be adopted.
Seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any comments? All in favor? Unanimous. Motion's carried. We have business initiated by council members. We do, I believe, Councillor Steer, you have ACRD update.
Yes,
just not on here, but I know you do.
Yeah, just a quick one. There was the implementation of the West Coast Transit Service is going to be delayed until January of 2023. That's due to the delivery of the 5 light-duty buses. They won't be delivered, unfortunately, until winter of 2022. About a 6-month delay in the delivery of those buses, and that is it.
Super duper. No unfinished business. We have a question period. Do we have anybody signed up for a question period? Ms. Best.
Thank you, Mayor Law. We do not have any existing questions, so I'm going to just ask the public who are in attendance if they want to ask a question to council regarding any item on the agenda. Please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom window, and I will call once. Seeing none, calling twice. Seeing none, and calling thrice, and there are no questions.
Super. Then what we're going to do is we're going to move into the closed session, and then we're going to take a little break. So hold on, council. Here we go. And I'll just move that recommendation because I have the addition of a clause. I recommend that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 91 of the Community Charter to discuss matters related to A, personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality, or another position appointed by the municipality. C, labor relations or other employee relations. And K, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service that are at their preliminary stages, and that, in the view of council, could reasonably be expected to harm the interest of the municipality if they were held in public. Have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Thick. Comments? All in favor? Okay, we will move into the closed session, and I'll call a recess. You guys like 5 minutes? Okay, 5 minutes. We'll do. Gosh, I need a font enlarger on my computer here. We'll do 1646 or 7.